Hi, and welcome to another episode of Creepy and Geeky. On this episode, the kids are back for a double feature of My Bloody Valentine, the original and the remake. But first, let's catch up on what we've been watching and doing since our last episode together. Katrina?
So what I have been doing since our last episode with us is I got tickets to go see a artist, MX7 I'm not going to say the date, but I'm going to see her sometime in the future. So that's really exciting because she is one of my favorite musical artists, and she got me through a really tough period in my life a few years ago. So It's really cool. And I have finished all of the games in the Life is Strange series, finally. Took me a long time, but I did it. And I think my favorite of them all is Life is Strange True Colors because it's I don't know. I think the concept of it is really nice, and it's just a beautiful game.
Is that the latest one?
Yeah, it's the latest one. Other than the remasters for the original two games, it's the latest one. So it's a very pretty game, and it has, I think, a kind of good message to it. For TV shows, I've been rewatching Once Upon a Time on Disney Plus. My parents and I were watching it like when it was first coming out, but I think we stopped like around the time that Elsa came into the show, or like maybe the season after that.
It was just a little bit before that. Yeah.
No, we watched it.
We went back and watched the Frozen episodes later. We didn't watch them when they first came out. We ended up watching them later, and I think we caught up towards the end of the series at that point. I don't remember.
Okay.
I didn't. You guys watched it. I didn't. But
well, anyways, I am now on the third season of it.
Yes.
So that's usually when I watch shows, I usually just like watch a few episodes and just like fall off. But I haven't done that with this one. I think it's keeping my attention long enough, and it's like I'm still remembering parts of it that happen. But then there's parts I don't remember that I'm like, oh fuck, like what's going on?
Right.
So it's fun to watch, and my sister-in-law is also watching it. We're watching it on our own time, so it's been fun to talk about it that way.
Right.
And then with Hunger Games, I'm still listening to the audiobooks. I'm currently still listening to Catching Fire.
It's a little slow there, Katrina.
It's a slow read. It's a slow read because I've been listening to music and stuff instead in the car. But yeah, it's still a good book and a good audiobook. Tatiana Maslany is a pretty good narrator.
Oh, okay.
So,
I know you had issues with her in the beginning, so
I only had issues with like the singing parts.
Oh, gotcha.
But it's fine. There's not that many, so her narration is really good. So
okay.
That's what I've been doing.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right, Harrison?
Been playing a lot of games.
As usual.
Yeah, as usual. As per my vibe. Played Life is Strange True Colors off of Katrina's recommendation. Very good game. Liked it a lot. And the other games that I've been playing a lot lately is the roguelike Darkest Dungeon. Just been enjoying punishing myself playing that game and crying when my best heroes die. And then the other one that I just started is the game Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. That game is looking to be pretty fun. I really enjoy the fact that I get to jump onto the backs of the monsters and climb up to their heads and just stab them in the back of their head and go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. That's been fun. Really cool combat in that game. Definitely recommend it for people who are looking for a kind of a mix-up with action RPGs with some cool combat.
Okay. Then I caught up on some shows. Most of my stuff, all of my stuff is going to be TV shows in between whatever movies I watch for the podcast. It's typically just TV shows. So just finished Peacemaker last week. That's a great show. If you enjoyed the recent Suicide Squad movie by James Gunn, Peacemaker is a great follow-up to that and super highly recommended. It takes this, the douchebag character of Peacemaker, and humanizes him in a way that you just did not think could be done. And personally, my favorite member of the cast is Vigilante, played by Freddie Stroma. He's just this complete sociopath, but he's got a positive attitude and cracks me up all the damn time. So definitely check that out. It's on HBO Max now. I also finished The Witcher Season 2. I
Still need to do that.
I was not... So, for me, I'm not a big fantasy guy. So, I don't tend to watch a lot of stuff like that. But I did enjoy the first season. This season was not the first season. To me, it was a lot slower. There wasn't a lot going on. People were, like, they were stuck in one location for several episodes. It just wasn't the adventure that first one, that first season was. This one, it picked up in the last few episodes, but even then it couldn't really, for me, match the first season. I'm hoping that the next season is much better, but the first season was great. This season was okay. It wasn't bad, but if you're just going to be stuck in one location a long time, not doing a whole lot, it's going to be just kind of eh.
Do you think there was any reason why they were stuck in?
They were building the mythology more. They were building up a lot of the like about the convergence and about Ciri's true heritage and stuff like that. So they were building up a lot of that stuff. So it was a lot more exposition heavy. Without having all the action, which is fine. I don't mind normally, as long as there's a good mix, and there wasn't enough of a good mix, and the characters were still all separated again, and it was just kind of bleh. And we didn't get Jasker until like the later half of the season, and it was just kind of like, dude, the literal comic relief of the whole show that would have made like everything great is just like not there, and it just it just felt like really bogged down. Again, it wasn't a bad season. It just was not as fun as the first season.
It didn't hold up.
The first season was just so much more fun.
Okay.
So
interesting. I'll have to watch it.
And then, and that's on Netflix. And then a show that's been recommended to me, and I've been seeing everybody watch or talk about online. And my daughter's watched some of it, and everything is Euphoria on HBO Max. And that I watched the first season. I'm on like the second of the special episodes, so I haven't jumped into the second season that everybody's talking about now. But what I've seen so far is it's really good. Very, very. So I think people like to think that teenagers today are so much more like, troubled than we were when I was a kid and everything. But when I was a kid, teenagers were doing drugs. They were sleeping around. They were doing all this other stuff that they do in this show. I mean, we just didn't have social media to make things worse. So, social media definitely does not help things. Having smart devices doesn't help things. So that aspect of it is definitely interesting. This is not a show for sure, if you have a mature teenager, you can let them watch that, but there's a lot of nudity, a lot of sexual situations, a lot of drugs. It just depends on what your kid is like, if you want to let them watch that. Yeah, it's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy on its subject matter. Lots of deep stuff. These kids are troubled, for sure. They've all got their own issues and troubles and everything, but it's interesting to see them, tackle them.
I think that despite all of the stuff that it goes into with all the nudity and all this other stuff, but if you think that your child is mature enough to handle these topics, I think it would be really good for you to watch it with your child and have these conversations. Yeah. Because if they just watch it by themselves and then hide that, then that's gonna be. I mean, I wouldn't like. If your child is interested in watching it, and you think that they're mature enough to handle it, I would watch it with them.
Or if you're not comfortable watching it with them because of the nudity and everything else like that, because I know some people are not comfortable watching stuff like that with their kids, watch it separately, but talk about it afterward.
Yeah, I just think
because I do think Yeah.
a good idea for like a parent-child bonding and to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Because they are very important conversations to have at the time. So
Yeah, it deals with a lot of stuff about depression and bullying and everything that goes into being a kid. Not just today, but like I said, it's the same stuff we dealt with in my generation as well. That nothing's changed in regards to that. All of that stuff existed when I was a kid too, and so as long as you're somebody who isn't so like grown up that you just don't remember being a kid, that you don't remember, like, I didn't get into drugs, I wasn't having sex in high school or anything like that, but so I can't completely relate to these kids, but I know people who did, so I can somewhat relate because it's sort of like seeing their stories too. Having that and being able to talk to you, Katrina, because you've watched the show and everything, and hear you go, this is nothing like what I know of anything about high school.
I know kids who would like drink and do stuff in
Right.
high school, but I never like associated myself with them.
Right, and that was the same with me when I was a kid.
I just knew them. I
was too much.
didn't.
I was too
yeah.
much of a
We're
goody
a family
nerd.
of squares.
Yeah,
Pretty
exactly.
much. Yeah.
We're just so nerdy. It's not even funny.
I'm 20 right now, and like I think like for me personally, when I turn 21, that is when I'm gonna have like my first everything, because I want to have that like special age where you get all that, where you get that milestone. Because if I don't have that milestone at 21 and I have it beforehand, it kind of defeats the purpose of like, it doesn't defeat the purpose of turning 21, but it kind of undercuts the
You're talking about
milestone of it.
drinking.
Yeah, so it
having a drink,
undercuts the milestone of it for me. For me,
Right.
it's not for everyone.
Right.
It feels like that, but yeah.
I haven't seen any of Euphoria. That's another show that's definitely on my list. Need to watch it. But I was curious, considering that we are on a horror podcast, do you guys think that the portrayal of social media is portrayed in a, like, sort of kind of, not necessarily, like, horrific way, but in a, like the demon kind of
No,
way,
actually,
or is it a little bit more of a,
I think it's
like,
realistic.
more
Well-
nuanced take where there's the good and the bad of
Okay, so
social
it's
media?
the social media is not really a thing in it though either. Like, it's used. You see them texting each other, or you see people scrolling stuff or whatever like that. But it's really not a. It's not a focus of it, which I think is great, because they're not demonizing social media as part of this,
And
they're not
honestly-
demonizing these kids either. They're just showing what these kids are going through. And not putting good or bad on them.
Honestly, in real life, social media isn't like it's a big thing online and online spaces, but when you're in real life, it's not that big of a deal. You're not talking about social media that much unless you're like
Unless you're obsessed with it.
unless you're obsessed with
Yeah.
it. And so I feel like these people in the show aren't obsessed with it.
Right.
So they're not talking about it, and I feel like that's realistic.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I think at most I talk to people about like TikToks and shit. Like, that's all I really talk to people about. Like, that's
Yeah, when people are like, "Oh my God, social media is like the downfall of everything," it's like, no, it's not.
when I was on Stan
the
Twitter, I
people
would
who-
talk to people about that. But that's
But
a
again, you were
separate
very
entity.
specifically talking about certain things, and so it's just not,
As someone who doesn't use it at all, I
Yeah, you
find
don't
it
have
I find
anything.
it well, that's why I'm asking you guys, because I don't necessarily have an opinion when it comes to
Yeah.
social media. Is I for myself, I think that it isn't something I want to engage with, just because there's nothing there for me, because
Valid.
I have no friends. But but
join the club. I don't think any of us
yeah.
have friends. What are you talking about?
I have friends. Online
also
friends.
just
That's
typically
fine.
think my life is boring, but
Right.
but in regards to social media, in terms of how it's perceived, I hear things on either side of the aisle where it's either a thing that's really useful because it helps like promote protests and like helps bring people together in communities and brings a lot of people who would feel isolated together.
Well, yeah.
Versus the dark side of it, where it can be used a lot in a like bullying context, where it is a place where
It's both.
There
It's literally
is-
just both.
I personally have seen both sides of
Yeah.
it, the bullying and the community side. In middle school, I got cyberbullied.
Yeah.
And so that really fucking sucked, but I've grown from that trauma. And and in high school, I started using Discord a lot, and so that helped me make friends growing up, that helped me grow as a person.
I think
And
that's an
so-
inherent nature in anything social. Anything social that you use, whether it be something online or something in real space, you are going to find both positives and negatives. You're going to you're going to find friendship, and you're going to find people who hate you for whatever reasons. They hate you and they want to bully you or whatever. That's just nature in itself of being interactive with other people.
Yeah.
So what you can do, and this is what I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And what I do is I try to carefully curate who I'm following online so that I try to only keep positives. You know, so that way I'm not super doom scrolling, which you can do. I've done it. Like, I'll get on Twitter and I'll start just looking at all the comments of something stupid, and then just like, okay, I got to get off that. You know, but
I
most
did
of
that
the
for
time,
like 2 hours the other night. I was like on a tweet thread that was like, it was a poll that was for a radio station, and it was about who was gonna, like, if they were gonna play Nicki Minaj or MXM Tune. And so there were a lot of like Nicki Minaj fans in the comments and a lot of MXM Tune fans in the comments just like beefing, and it was like, what the fuck?
and it's
I was
so
like,
dumb too. Like, why does it matter?
Yeah,
like,
I'm like, these are both two like successful
you
people.
wanna-
One obviously more successful than the other,
Yeah.
but like that's why.
yeah.
Why are
and
we
it's-
undercutting these things?
It's
I
so
feel like,
dumb.
yeah.
Like, that's the stupid arguments like that, or the people who troll for just to have fun or whatever. That's just the stupid aspects of the internet that I don't like and I don't participate in. You know, I will just move on to something else, and you know. But again, Euphoria. Going back to Euphoria, it doesn't really focus on that, which I appreciate too. Like, I'm sure there's aspects of it that are in there, but mostly it's the interpersonal actual things that are going on between
yeah,
each
it's
other.
the relationships between all the
Right.
characters that are really the most important part of the show.
Right.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
And just about the every one of them carries some kind of issue, not just damage or trauma or anything like that, but they have issues of one shape or another. And from what I've seen so far with the first season, it's just how that colored them up to their point now, because they're all about 16, 17 years old on the show.
Okay.
And so, and I haven't started the second season yet. I'm about to, but once that starts in, I'll be able to, because I've heard this second season's kind of wild.
I haven't watched the past 2 episodes, and the season finale is this Sunday. So
Man, I gotta get caught up then.
I need to get caught up too.
Okay. All right. Well, anything else before we jump into the movies?
Nope.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, this month we did My Bloody Valentine. I meant to have this episode out actually the day before Valentine's Day, but because of the scheduling and everything with the kids, it's just been a mess. So unfortunately, it's being pushed back until now. But we're gonna get it out just in time for the end of the month. What did you guys think of the first My Bloody Valentine movie, the 1981 version, Katrina?
I was expecting it to be like the things that we've watched in the past, and it was like, kind of the things that we've watched in the past were kind of like, they're comedy-ish
Schlocky
and
holiday horror movie.
Yeah. So I was expecting it to be like that, but it was actually like not that bad. I was going into it with like disappointment in mind, and I was not disappointed. So, well, yeah, I was like, yeah, not disappointed. That's the right thing.
What I think does this movie service is that it's not like the Christmas movies that we watched, where the framing device of Christmas defined everything about those films, except for Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. I don't know what was going on in that film.
Yeah, what the fuck?
All right,
but when
let's not go into flashback mode here.
but when it came to this movie, the framing device of Valentine's Day was just a plot move. It was just a way to move the plot to get people together, to present situations, and to kind of have like interesting reveals with the heart-shaped boxes and everything. And so, and for all intents and purposes, it really had no bearing on the killer and the killer's costume and
Right.
and
Yeah.
motives and everything else. There, like the Valentine's Day framing was purely just for stylistic.
It was honestly
decisions.
just coincidence that the date that the thing happened on was Valentine's
Yeah,
Day.
exactly.
That was the
Yeah,
most important
right.
thing, was that it was just the date that it happened. It didn't have really much to do with Valentine's Day.
And
So.
and speaking of like costume design and everything, what a great slasher! Like just
Oh, the miner is awesome.
the miner,
Harry
the
Warden?
miner,
Yeah.
the miner with the pickaxe. Like
Yeah.
that's a great slasher.
Yeah, and you don't expect that too, because it's so like
Pickaxe is a great weapon.
it's just so understated of a like because it's just I mean obviously jumpsuits are kind of indicative of
Yeah.
of
You got-
like
you
slashes
got-
with
you got
Michael
your
Myers,
Michael
and
Myers
Jason,
and Jason.
but then but it's a great look because it's got the full mask on. You don't know who's underneath the mask. You don't know who's actually killing people, which plays into it. But yeah, I mean, I take your point with the Valentine's not playing as it's not part of the overall aesthetic of it in a way.
It's a Valentine's Day movie by coincidence.
Right, right. Well, I mean, in the beginning it is, but then he is very specifically
Yeah.
killing people and making sure that people don't like have a party on Valentine's Day because he'll come back and kill. He doesn't want
Yeah.
anybody doing that. And I mean, and again, the town's name is Valentine Bluffs.
Yeah.
So it is very connected to Valentine, which sucks for them too because
Yeah.
they haven't been able to have a Valentine's dance / party for 20 years because of the incident with Harry Warden. And so it's like, oh, that sucks. And this is very much a part of our town as part of our name, and we can't even do anything about this because this jerk just killed everybody. So
I just think it's funny using the term jerk for a serial killer.
he was a jerk.
And then the kills are pretty creative.
Once you actually got to see the real ones.
Yeah. So
Harrison
I had-
accidentally watched the theatrical cut when I gave him.
I was unaware there were two versions, and so I started watching the theatrical cut, which was toned down on gore and everything else. Basically, it knocked it down to like a PG-13.
I came in
and-
partway through, and I watched one of the kills, and I was like, "Ooh, he's gonna really like this kill," and then it was like not what I was expecting. I was like, "Wait, you're watching the wrong version."
Yeah,
So we quickly switched it out, and
so I ended up fast forwarding just for the kills, and got back to where I was. But no, kills were very creative. Also, there's a lot of really good humor to some of the kills, which I think is good and bad in certain ways. I think that for a horror movie to succeed in what it's trying to do, which is to scare you, you kind of need to have like horror. You need to have the moment of the kill of you're like, oh my god, like that's terrible.
Right.
But then there were some kills where I was laughing more than terrified. And the prime example one for me was the guy who was just opening up the door to
That's
look at his
exactly
little
what I was
trap.
thinking of when you were talking.
But I
And
think
then-
that one was meant to be funny.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure it
know?
was.
Yeah.
Like I think another.
'Cause this was
I
supposed
think
to
a
be
good example
comedic, for
of,
sure.
I think a good example of the movie succeeding in creating a horrific kill is when the body falls out of the washing machine and rolls around several
Yeah.
times, and like that's like okay, like props, like
I
that's
thought it was
pretty
a
good.
dryer.
It is a dryer.
Whatever.
Yeah. That's why-
Either case.
That's why she was burned.
Yeah, whatever. I said the wrong
I know.
appliance.
I just messing with you.
Um,
But yeah, no. But this was meant to be sort of a. It was meant to have comedic tones to it. Obviously, the Howard guy was being a buffoon the whole way through, and there was definitely a lot of jokes flying here and there. I think that overall the kills were really good, especially in the unrated cut where you get to see the gore a lot better.
The one kill where the guys where Howard dies.
Yeah.
That was a insane one where he like falls and it's like in his head just like
Yeah.
like and his body falls all the way down.
Yeah.
oh right, yeah,
Yeah, where his head gets pulled
In the
off
mine.
of it, yeah.
Ooh,
Because that, I'm trying to remember the situation on that. Because
They were
They were climbing up the
the
ladder to get away.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he got the noose wrapped around his neck or whatever, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, he got
Okay.
some rope wrapped around his neck.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
and so he because of the gravity,
Which-
he his
I had horror movie plot problems with that, where I was like, okay, just because he died doesn't mean you shouldn't still keep climbing. Like keep climbing. I mean, it might have just been the trap that he set to like prevent people from getting out. But it's like, I mean, one time and then it's done.
Right.
Presumably still down there.
Yeah.
I thought the like that one fight with Axel and TJ in the junkyard or whatever was like really stupid. I was like, that like escalated super quickly out of nowhere to me.
She's my girl from a long time ago, so she's still mine.
Yeah.
No, she's mine now.
Like they had talked about it like once or twice before.
Thanks for the reenactment there.
I mean, that's the encapsulation of that fight.
They were like, they had like talked once or
We have
twice about it
professional reenactments on the
beforehand,
show.
and then they saw like the girls saw both of them together at the like dance room. I don't know what it's, the community center. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a community center.
So she saw both of them there, and so then that was basically all of the interaction that they had at that point. And then they just sit together in a car and drink, and then they start fighting. Sorry, and then they start fighting all of a sudden. What? I was like, you need to have more like information before that. I feel like
Well, I think that's the first time. Like
because you were gone for 10 years. I feel like there's more.
Yeah,
No. I don't think he was gone for 10 years.
That's what he said.
he was gone for a while.
He was gone for a little while.
I don't know how.
In the remake, he's gone for 10 years.
I'm pretty sure it's 10 years in the original too.
I'm not sure.
Well,
If it was, I don't know.
Okay.
The problem is that the guys in the first movie are supposed to be right around in their 20s, I think, but they all look like they're in their 30s minimum.
Yeah, they don't.
So,
they don't look that young.
Most of them. So there's a couple of baby faces in there, but yeah, the main characters are all like, dudes, you guys are way older than you're.
Oh, I forgot about my favorite kill. My favorite kill was the shower kill. That one was fun. I really liked just the silhouette of the water coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
Like that one was really good. I'm glad it wasn't like you saw the gore and like it was just like a spray of blood.
Yeah.
Like I was glad they kind of kept it a little bit more like mysterious.
Yeah, that one's a good one.
But yeah, overall it was a good movie. Something I want to ask you guys just generally about the My Bloody Valentines is about the twists of the films, and like the reveal of who the killer is and why.
We might want to wait until after we talk about the second movie.
If we want to wait, we can wait.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So let me think if there's anything else I want to say about the first one.
Well, the first one was made in Canada. You know, while you're watching it, you can definitely hear some very Canadian accents.
I'm sorry.
Some sorries, some very pronounced sorries. It was a good movie. It's one of those ones that I think is good. It's not a favorite. I've actually saw the remake first, and I actually really enjoy the remake, and I enjoy the remake more than I enjoy the original. I do find this one to be good as well, and I like it. It's not as high up there for me. Every time I watch it, I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now, and every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more each time.
If you really enjoyed that 80s slasher experience, then this one is right in that alley. It's it's smack dab in that like Friday the 13th, Halloween kind of vibe, where it's just the masked killer who goes around, kills a bunch of people, interesting kills, and then reveals at the end that like they're someone, and then it kind of resolves in a somewhat anticlimactic way to set
kind
up
of
possibly
ambiguous.
a sequel.
Yeah,
and
very ambiguous
that's how a
ending.
lot of them ended.
Yeah.
At that time, so it's
all about the franchise.
If you really like the 80s franchise horror vibe, then like you're gonna like My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah. No, it's a good movie. I don't know if there's necessarily, like we said, I don't know if there's necessarily a lot to talk about it, and maybe we can talk about it. Maybe it'll come up more in relation to the remake, because the remake goes into some different
Remake takes
areas.
some things from the first one and kind of reworks it and kind of plays around with it. Especially plays around with the Harry Warden myth and
well, in for the most part. So with the remake, the Harry Warden stuff is very much similar to the original movie. Something happens in the mine, people die in there. He gets loose after he gets out and kills a bunch of people afterward.
Yeah.
Then he's killed or whatever. In the first movie, he's institutionalized, although they can't find him, and they never that part never gets resolved either. We never do find out what happened to Harry Warden.
Yeah, Harry Warden just disappeared. Well, wait, no, I thought they said that he died.
No. Remember they call the girl?
Yeah, they call her, and then I thought she said that she died.
No, she said she doesn't know what happened to him. She has no record of him.
Interesting.
And we never get a follow-up because she was supposed to call back later, but the
right. I think they laid out a couple things that could have happened to him. It's basically where it's like
he was released.
If there's no information, he was either released, he died, or something else.
Yeah.
Thing.
So in that one we get no resolution to Harry Warden, but in the remake,
which also serves to set up a potential sequel.
Yeah. So in the remake, we get the whole Harry Warden story in the beginning, mostly in the credits, in the opening credits. They kind of go over all that with news clippings coming in and out,
which is so good. I love the use of the news clippings.
So what's also really cool about the remake is it was done in 3D. So. Yes. Even though we don't have 3D TVs or anything here, you can still appreciate what they were doing with the 3Ds. And this is where I love 3D. I hate the immersive 3D that we were getting with everything else. It was great. It was fine or whatever. But if you're not going to throw stuff at my face and make me have pickaxes or whatever coming at your face, what's the point? To me, that version of 3D where you're just in a world that looks 3D and you could step into it, fine. That's interesting-ish, but I want stuff that's more gimmicky. If you're going to do something like 3D, really it's a gimmick. Yeah. Make it a gimmick.
That's also really effective for horror. It's to have
the
things
effective.
Kind of pop out at the screen at you, and it makes you. It makes it a little bit more visceral.
Yeah, it makes it more fun. It's that's part of the fun of horror movies is the jump and everything. And so when you're when you get something right at your face, it's going to be So it's more fun for that. Now. We didn't get to watch it that way, but you can appreciate that in this movie, even though you don't get to see it in 3D. But
it is somewhat funny though when it happens, because when you're watching a 3D movie in 2D, they have a lot of lingering shots.
Yeah, a lot of lingering where it's pointed at you or something.
Speaking of the pickaxe shot that I just said, he throws the pickaxe at a car. At a car windshield, and it pierces the windshield, and if you're wearing the 3D glasses, it's popping out at your face. Yeah. But instead, it just looks weird, and then just
hangs
kind of
for
hangs
an
there,
extra second.
And it's there for maybe 2.5 seconds, and it's just a little long, but it works.
Yeah. So so they go back to the story. They go back and they tell you the whole story of Harry Warden and what happened to him in the mine, and that it's Jensen Ackles' fault, in some ways. So he and he's the son of the owner of the mine, which again that plays into the original. Yeah, TJ was the son of the owner of the mine.
Yep.
And this one he's just called Tom, but you see at one point his name is Tom J. Haniger.
Got it.
So he's still TJ. And so we get all that backstory. And then once Harry Warden wakes up after he's in the hospital, he goes on a murder spree, kills everybody. And then he goes in to attack the people at the mine, which brings us to our three main characters of Tom, Axel, and Sarah, which are basically three of the main characters from the original movie. And in this one, we pick up 10 years later, and Tom's coming back to this town isn't called Valentine Bluff. It's called Harmony. So different town name, but for the most part, very similar.
Yeah.
And so now it's 10 years later, and Tom's come back. Sarah's married Axel, has a kid with him. So it's a little bit different in that respect, because I feel like in the first movie he wasn't gone that long, that the relationship between her and Axel, Sarah and Axel in the first movie is still relatively new.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they've been together for a long time. They're definitely not married.
Yeah.
There's no kid. So in this one, married, kid.
There's a lot more.
Axel's the sheriff
relationship
now.
tension there, where
Right.
it's the old boyfriend comes back to town, but so much time has passed that is there anything even there anymore?
Right.
And
Well, now,
there's
still feelings there,
Yeah.
and that complicates the fact
Yeah.
that she obviously has a rocky marriage at this point right
Yeah.
now too, because spoiler alert, the husband's cheating on her, but.
That's not even a spoiler.
I know,
See
it's
it the first time you fucking see the adult
oh.
Axel.
Yeah, well, you see him, and then you see the girl, like, at the thing, just, like, giving him googly eyes at the bar, like, at the counter.
He's doing it back. It's
Yeah.
like, the fuck? At least be, like, try to be more hidden about it if you're gonna fucking cheat. Like,
yeah,
the
the
fuck?
subtlety is not
Yeah.
there at all. So, yeah, so it's, but, so there's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences. But in this one, we get a lot of Harry Warden-ish attacks. Somebody in a miner's outfit is killing people, everybody around them again. So it's very similar in a lot of ways, which is great. It holds up, and there's a lot of good callbacks, especially in terms of some of the kills, some of the sequences and stuff. We get a bunch of the dropping of the miner jumpsuits again, like in the first movie. They all started falling down. Around her. They did the same thing in this one. We get the pickaxe to the jaw. In the first one, it was to the old what's his name, bartender.
Yeah.
And then in this one, it's to Tom Atkins, the old sheriff. And if you guys don't know anything about Tom Atkins, he's a 80s horror legend. He was like in The Fog. He's the main character in Halloween 3.
Got it.
He's he was in what's it called? He was in the first Maniac Cop, which I just watched for another episode I'm doing, and he's just in all kinds of stuff. He was Night of the Creeps, so he's in a lot of good stuff. So it was cool to see him in this one, playing a cop again, because he plays cops a lot.
Speaking of scenes that are taken from the original and done in the remake, one of the ones that I think is done again and knocked out of the park by the remake is the walking down the hallway and smashing the lights with the pickaxe.
Yeah.
There's a lot more tension in that moment inside of the remake, because inside of the original film it kind of just happens, and it's just kind of the indication to the audience that Harry's here, and these people are in danger. Whereas with this one, it's happening during the climax of the film, and things have been revealed, and there's a lot of really cool things that they do with it, where each time he smashes the light, there's sometimes where he flashes the mining outfit over the final killer.
Right.
And it's really well done. And honestly, it's the thing that definitely puts the remake above the original film for me.
Well, and this is going into this. We're gonna go ahead and spoil this for everybody. In the first movie, in the original movie, it turns out that Axel is the killer, and I don't think we had any motivations for him.
His motivation was that, and this is what I want to talk to you guys about. I want to talk about the motivations behind each killer.
Okay.
Is his motivation was that Harry Warden killed his father in front of him.
Right. Okay.
And he was traumatized as a child to the point of becoming a Harry Warden, someone where he's basically like, there can be no fun on Valentine's Day because my father died on Valentine's Day, and so I have to make sure no one else can have fun.
Psychotic break.
So,
and then in the new one, it turns out, because this was hilarious, because Katrina and I were watching it together, and she's like, and they were going back and forth because they were very pointedly pointing at Axel the whole time, because they were just like, oh my god, it's Axel. And Katrina's like, it's Axel, we know already because it happened in the first movie. And it turns out it was Tom, and Katrina's like, what? So it was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so in this one, it was cool that they flipped it so that it was Tom instead, and
which the first movie points at Tom a lot. And so they kind of flipped the script a little bit.
So that's what was great about it, is you get it pointing the other direction, and you think it's going to be the one, and both of them, and it's always, they're both being played as red herrings, and turns out that it's the other one that you don't think it is. And like you said, in that sequence at the end where it's Tom, and for him though, what happens with him because of the attack 10 years ago where he almost died to him, he has taken on another personality, and that personality that takes over him is Harry Warden.
Yes.
And that's when he goes and kills, because you can tell he has no idea he's doing this.
Yeah.
He does not know that he's doing this as Harry Warden. And when he comes out of it, like, he has no clue whatsoever, and he completely thinks it's Axel the entire time. Just like we all do. And when he changes in front of them, it's really good. Like, Jensen Ackles is a great actor. Like, if anybody's watched him on anything, especially like Supernatural or anything, he's fantastic. And this was early. I mean, not early on, but this was in like the 4th or 5th season of Supernatural.
Yeah.
Both him and Jared Padalecki both made a horror movie remake in 2009.
Yeah.
Jensen Ackles made My Bloody Valentine, and Jared Padalecki made the Friday the 13th remake. And so, watching Jensen Ackles,
they were in it. Right?
well, yeah. So, but watching him change and then having him do that with the lights, where he's smashing the lights, and he's in his Tom form. He's not in a jumpsuit or anything.
He's in
and
just
every
a jacket
time he
and
hits
jeans.
every time he hits that light, it flashes him as Harry. Flashes as him as Harry. And Katrina, you didn't catch that. At first, I had to point that out. You were like, "Yeah, he's smashing the lights, whatever." And I was like, "No, look," because at first, at the very beginning, beginning, it's subtle, but it gets more prominent as he's doing it. And I think that's what you missed it the first couple of times, and then you started paying more attention to it.
I was
and
like,
that's
cool.
Yeah.
Well, and like I was saying, like that's why that one knocks it out of the park for me, because it does such a good job of like adding that visual to the mental, to the mental characteristic of the character of having the split personality and having the like smashing of the lights to flash the personality, and demonstrate the dual nature of Tom.
I think that this another aspect of the remake that works better for me too is that there's not as many characters. In the first movie, there are a lot of characters. You've got Howard, you've got what's his name, Hollis, you've got the regular trio. You've got all the girls.
This many names.
I know. I'm not good with names usually, so. So you get all the girls. You get Sarah. You get Patty. You get whoever else there is in there. But in this one, you've got. You do have characters. You have several characters in this one, but it feels more contained. There's not it's not as chaotic. The first one feels chaotic, like there's too many people around all at once.
This one also comes from a more modern horror slasher perspective,
right.
In a kind of like not necessarily postmodern, but kind of just from a different perspective than the 80s slasher film came from. Another one, the scenes that stands out to me in that one is the grocery store scene, where they're kind of going through the store and it's all dark, and you watch Harry cross by one of the aisles.
Well, he's standing down at the end,
right,
and then you look over at them, and they're about to come over to it, and just as they come over to it, he's not there anymore.
Yeah, and so like that's a really good kind of use of like.
Really
like
good
audience
editing.
perspective and like creating that tension, which is something that 80s horror films really didn't know how to use sometimes.
Well, I think they did here and there. Like, I mean, I think the language of horror movies and stuff, especially in slashers and stuff, was built in the 80s. And, especially because the 80s were the era of the slashers. And so anybody who's doing it nowadays can take all of those influences and redo them in ways that make it work maybe just a little bit better for modern audiences at least, whereas it wasn't as prevalent back then because they were still learning, they were still doing. And so
it's really the evolution of the Michael Myers like stalker aspect.
Yeah, I mean, because that's literally all, like, in a lot of ways that's exactly
my one argument against it is that Michael Myers, especially in the first one, especially in the first Halloween, it's very pointed whenever we see Michael. It's never like we see Michael in the background of a shot and they're just distracted and they're doing whatever and we're like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
there's Michael in the background.
Well, yeah, he's like next to the hedge, and then he's like
yeah.
out in the back of her yard.
But like,
and,
but that's
yeah.
the thing is like, Laurie always sees him. Like
Yeah.
he's always in an obvious place.
Right.
Whereas with this is overtly audience perspective. Audience sees the killer, but they don't, and so
Right.
that creates tension for us and not for the characters, and so that makes us have that kind of
But I also
antsy
think-
in our seats, like oh my god, he's right there, like
Yeah.
you need to find him, and like that kind of a thing that I think is missing in some 80s horror films.
I think that's why it's the difference between Michael Myers and the Harry Warden thing is different because of those two different things. Is it's not only just that it's the thing of the time, but it's also just that they're different killers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like for Michael Myers, it makes sense for him to only be visible when he's about to kill someone,
Michael-
because he's a stalker. So if he's visible when
Yeah.
he's not about to kill someone, then that's out of character for him because he's a stalker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for the minor, he's like he's
He's
like a mythical legend in the community.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
feel like that those scenes make him
he's a ghost.
yeah
like,
exactly.
he-
So I feel like that makes more sense for his character.
Yeah.
So
Michael is a serial killer. Harry Warden is legitimately a ghost.
Yeah.
Like not literally within the movie, but he is.
Well, and then everybody
a ghost
doesn't
for
believe
the
that Harry
community.
Warden's back. You know, each
Yeah.
time in both movies, nobody believes that Harry Warden's back. They're like, nah, come on, he died years ago, blah, 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 you know? And so it's like, he can't be back.
So the thing that I really wanted to talk to you guys about is both movies use mental illness to give a reason for their killers to kill. And what I wanted to kind of ask you guys and kind of talk about is the depictions of mental illness in both movies, as well as not necessarily which of the two movies, but how each movie approaches the different form of mental illness that causes the psychotic break that makes them killers. And if you think that either of the killers are sympathetic, or if you think that they are inherently evil because of whatever their psychotic break was.
I don't think that the first one for Axel, I don't think his is particularly mental illness. I feel like it's just his grief. I don't think that it's depression or anything like that. I think it's just his grief manifesting in him having to do this. Like I don't think it's stemming from a mental illness. I could be wrong, but I didn't see that in the movie. I feel like it's more grief related.
The thing that stood out for me in the first movie is when he's running away at the end, where he's like I'm coming, Harry, I'm coming, and like he's obviously living in a different reality. He's living in this reality that Harry's still in the mines, and that Harry is this not necessarily a father figure, but a like role model for him, and so there's that aspect to his character that's at least expressed towards the very end.
Well, I think in both cases, both of them are haunted by what happened to them in regards to Harry Warden. With the first movie, Axel having his father murdered in front of him by Harry, and then in the remake, having him be fully on attacked by Harry and like almost killed by him if it weren't for the cops showing up in time. That I think that's, you know, it causes trauma for both of them in ways that they just can't get past. And I don't know, like it definitely seems like for the remake with Tom, he's definitely having I'm not sure, I'm no doctor, I don't know one way or the other what these diagnoses would be, but I'm assuming it's some form of DID, in terms of having a multiple personality, and that one other personality is Harry Warden. Whereas with Axel's isn't about becoming Harry Warden for him.
Yeah. No, it's not.
His is a full-on just, I'm taking revenge against everybody else because my father died due to this guy, and for some reason I just feel like nobody else can have fun and get past it, you know, because I can't get past it. So in a way, I think that Axel in the first movie is actually not a good person, because he's taking the trauma that happened to him in a place that is not good. It's not healthy. Whereas with Tom in the remake, he's not under any kind of control of that. That is a personality that is subsuming him, that is taking over completely, and he has no control over that.
Yeah.
And so those two differences are a lot, and so I think it's interesting.
And he doesn't realize that he
No.
is manifesting as
Yeah.
Harry
He has
until
no
the
clue.
end when they're like, Harry's not here, Tom. Like,
He doesn't even know then, because Harry comes
really?
towards them.
At that moment, Harry comes.
He
takes
becomes
over.
Harry. Like, he's like freaking
Yeah.
out. He's like, oh no, he's right there,
think-
and then all of a sudden he's
well,
like, I'm
I
Harry.
think that is.
I mean, I'm also not a doctor, but
What?
from the like the things about dissociative identity disorder that I do know is that the switch in personalities can take many different forms, and I feel like that, and they have their own distinct personalities and ways of speaking, ways
Yeah.
of moving,
Right.
all of that. So I feel like the way that he acts, like Jensen Ackles. Sorry, I don't.
Jensen Ackles.
He he switches those two
Yeah.
characters is, I think, a pretty good way of just differentiating the two personalities.
Right.
Well,
And you
he
only
does
see
get a
it
little
really
bit more
once.
imposing. He
Yeah.
kind of comes.
Yeah.
He moves his
So
shoulders
they
forward
have their
a little bit
own
when he's Harry.
mannerisms, and I think that's a very interesting.
Right. So it's like
He loses a lot of emotion on his
Yeah,
face.
because up until the last couple of decades, we always called it schizophrenia,
Yeah.
multiple personalities,
No.
and it was in pop culture, it was always called schizophrenia for having
There's a
multiple
lot of
personalities.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of cinematic.
Yeah, it was always,
history
it was
of
not
calling
right,
it
and that's
that.
why people still to this day have problems and still call it schizophrenia when it's not.
Yeah.
Schizophrenia
It's
is
a-
hallucinations. That's not a personality disorder.
Right,
But a lot of
that's-
people don't know
but
that
people
because
don't-
a lot of people used it in film as a catch-all term for any kind of mental illness.
right.
Oh,
and
see, I
so
didn't know that.
yeah,
That's
so,
unfortunate.
Yeah. So, but I want to circle back to this, that it's interesting how many of these movies that we watch, that the killers do have traumas and mental illnesses and such, and that ends up becoming unfortunately, I think that it's a crutch in a lot of ways, because it gives the villain an out, because they're just
Yeah.
so crazy that that's the reason why they're killing people. They're
Yeah.
just like, people don't kill just because they want to kill. Like, sure, I mean, generally speaking, anybody who's actually killing somebody's probably a little screwed up in the head,
Yeah.
but sometimes they kill for no reason. And that goes back to Scream, especially the first Scream, which I thought was interesting, because sure, obviously Billy, has issues, but he's killing because he wants to kill.
Yeah.
And Stu is just following along. And so neither one of them really have any inherent psychoses.
Stu's having fun, and
Yeah.
and that's and so that, but that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this, is
Yeah.
because this movie does. I wanted to specifically talk about My Bloody Valentine, the remake, because I feel like this movie, for what it's worth, actually does a decent.
I mean, as far as we understand,
someone who does not
Yeah.
have DID, like I'm well aware that any representation as a killer with DID is
Yeah,
is
Yeah.
problematic, but for the purposes of the split personality narrative that they
Right.
constructed for the film, I feel that they did a decent job of making Tom a sympathetic character.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not one that at the end of the movie we're like, yeah, he's dead. Like,
Yeah.
like good job. Like, you took down the killer. It's more of a, like, man, okay, wow, that was really heavy and
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
scary
Yeah,
for a
that
moment.
sucks
there.
for him.
And, like,
The Harry Warden identity is stemmed from trauma, which is in most cases the reason for dissociative identity disorder, is that it is
Yeah.
identity stemmed
Right.
from a traumatic experience, especially during childhood. That's
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
usually happens. I think that's also, like, I think that they at least did a little bit of research, maybe
Yeah,
the
maybe.
writers into
Yeah.
DID.
Well,
to
and I think we
represent that.
understand it a little bit more nowadays
Yeah.
too, because we're starting to get better representations of it on in movies and such. One such movie that we haven't talked about on the podcast yet, is Split by M. Night Shyamalan. That with James McAvoy does fantastic job with multiple personalities in that.
I've heard some criticisms though. I've seen criticism from the DID community about it. So.
Oh, of course. There's always going to... They're doing... I mean, they're building a movie about a guy who's kidnapping and killing people. So, of course, that's going to be an issue for people in the DID mental health community that think that that's
It's just that there's not a lot of positive representation
Right.
in media about
and we always
it.
see it as negatives, as they're always killers and such.
And so
I completely agree with that.
That's the thing, is that most people only know about DID from media. And so if they don't go out of their way to look these things up and understand it more in a real life sense, then they're just going to be stuck into the thinking that all people with DID are like the guy in Split, which is not healthy. That's not.
Exactly.
It's not true. So.
And so that's why I think that with My Bloody Valentine, there's also an art, like the thing about that movie that I think is important to kind of consider is that apparently until the reveal you thought it was Axel, and I think that
and I think everybody thinks it's Axel,
and for that reason the movie portrays Axel as a terrible person. Like even at the end, Axel is not a hero. No, Axel is not a horrible, terrible person that
and I hate at the end where he's like, I love you, and she's like, I love you too, and I'm like, no.
That's the major issue of that movie.
Oh yeah, that makes me so mad. I'm like, he's been cheating on you for years. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and so that's a big issue. But in regards to the portrayal of the characters, Axel is a terrible person. But when you look at Tom as a character, Tom really doesn't do anything wrong. Tom is actually trying to protect Sarah. Tom is trying to figure out what is going on. Tom's actually trying to shut down the mine.
Yeah,
and
he's trying to...
he's originally there to sell the mine, but then he's like, no, I'm not going to sell the mine now because I realize that's actually a bad thing. Whatever.
Well, yeah, I'm going to ruin
plus
the
he wants to.
and
plus he wants to try and get back with Sarah. He's trying to get back together.
But again, for what it's worth, Tom overall isn't a...
Tom has good intentions. His Harry Warden personality was like...
Exactly. Yeah. And so what I'm trying to say about that is that in terms of characters who are actually sympathetic and generally good morally, Tom in his Tom personality is generally a moral person.
Right.
And that stands out among his foil, Axel, who is an absolute piece of shit.
Right.
And so for what it's worth, there is actually something there where it's like that only when he's Harry Warden is Tom ever actually doing stuff that is morally wrong. Right. And so that to me is kind of an important factor in this representation of this mental illness inside of this film to consider when you're watching it, because I think that we can get trapped in the split personality, he's aware of everything he's doing,
right? But no, you can tell at the end he has no clue. And it's important to
remember that he's not not aware of everything.
Because even when we see, that's the thing, even when they make the reveal that it's him, and then we see all these flashes to him killing and then him taking off the mask after each thing and everything. He's not remembering that. That's not him remembering. Yeah. That's just them showing the audience, it was really him all along. So now he is still at that point under the Harry identity, and it's cool. I like the ending in that way too, because it doesn't neatly tie it up either, because then you see him get rescued, escape, and walk out.
I think it's super interesting, though, is that I don't think Tom knows about Harry, but Harry definitely knows about Tom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the difference with the personalities.
Because he trapped himself in that cage. He specifically trapped himself
one is
so
aware
he wouldn't
of the
know.
Other, but the other isn't. So it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Harry personality knows enough that... To trap himself in there to give himself plausible deniability. Yeah. So, yeah. So,
But yeah,
Alright.
no. Two very good films. Remake for me stands out a little bit more.
Yeah, I like the remake more.
One thing that we haven't talked about that I do want to talk about before
Okay.
we end is the naked scene
Oh, yeah.
in the remake.
Okay.
I think
Yes.
that is
It's a power move.
yeah. So the nudity in the remake, love it.
Okay, so I don't know if I told you guys this before, and I think I have.
Yeah, you've
but I've
told
told you guys this before, that they were originally going to do that scene with her wearing a sheet through most of it, because they wanted
Yeah,
to
like-
Yeah.
preserve some modesty for her
Yeah.
or whatever. But the sheet, she kept tripping on it or kept getting in the way, so she actually suggested, let's just do it where I'm full nude the whole time.
Badass.
And yeah, badass, because they don't shy away from that at all in that movie.
No.
That
No,
movie's
no.
one of the few I've seen
It's
that like have full frontal
Yeah,
nudity
yeah.
for a long
for
time.
minutes. Yeah, and it's it's crazy. And she does not having any clothes on does not make her less of a badass in that
Yeah.
in that
Oh
sequence.
no, she kicks ass. In
I think that
scene.
is one of the best uses of nudity in any of the movies that we've talked about so far.
Right, because one, and then this time it's not gratuitous
Yeah.
because it's part of the plot. She
Yeah.
was just having sex with that guy, which, by the way, also the guy that she's having sex with, the trucker, he's the writer of the movie.
Ah, I see,
So
okay.
he's also an actor too.
Yeah.
So, but he wrote the movie. But so she's having sex with him. Then he treats her like a hooker at that point,
Yeah.
like videotaping it, and she gets pissed. And so she goes running out there because she's like, I don't have time to stop him if I grab clothes.
Yeah.
So she's just like, I'm grabbing my gun and I'm
Yeah.
gonna go stop him. And so that's great. Like it's
She's
totally
wearing high heels the whole time,
She was-
like fucking badass. I love that fucking scene. And I'd seen that scene before, I'm pretty sure, because as soon as the scene started where she was like walking out beside the truck, I was like, oh yeah, I know this scene.
Yeah.
Because you might have shown it to me.
I may have
past,
shown
or
it to you
I
in
might have
terms
just
of
like
trying
walked
to like
in while you were watching it at some point.
That's probably what happened.
So I just love that scene, and I think it's a great use of nudity, and I think
Yeah.
that it is
We need more.
totally
of that.
badass.
We need
We need
more.
empowering nudity,
Empowering nudity.
to
Well, and
desexualize the human body.
Right. Well, and I think that in certain
And we
terms,
need
I
it
think
with-
there's a way that works. And like I was saying before in the earlier episodes about the gratuitousness of it at times is part of what they're talking about. Part of what the movie is trying to tell you is about like the male gaze in a way, not always. In a way, it's very cheap and very gratuitous and everything. But in certain way, like again, we'll go back to Black Christmas, the 2006 Black Christmas.
Yeah.
There was no need for that
Yeah, there's no need
whatsoever.
for that.
There was no need for it because there was like absolutely no reason for her to
There's
be
nothing
shown in
plot
that way.
related.
There was nothing plot
it was
related.
Purely just to see boobs.
Yeah. And so you get into and as much as we didn't like the long lingering shots of a hairy man ass in the first Silent Night, Deadly Night movie, that still was a plot point because he was still being traumatized by a sexual situation that he then got in trouble for that he wasn't involved in other than looking at because he got caught looking at that.
Yeah.
And so that he got in trouble for that. And
Went
so
on a little
I
too
think-
long to
I
get
think
that
that-
plot point across.
Right. It
I
didn't
think
need to
the
be that
same-
long.
I think the same thing could have gotten across though if it was just like two characters kissing and then over the clothes like groping. I feel like that could have been
you could
done
have shown
too.
that in a way too. And here's the thing too: you could have shown moaning on the other side of the door, him peeking through. You didn't need to see anything on the other side, and you would have gotten the point that he was seeing people have sex.
Yeah.
And so you can do things in that way, and that's not a bad thing, one way or the other.
The other thing to keep in mind, and again, you can maybe speak on this a little bit more, Dak, because you were a teenager around
Right.
in that decade. But the '80s was a very prudish time. It was a very clamped down time. There was a lot of religious fundamentalism, and so scenes like that in movies were kind of like
It was a response to that.
it was like a haha, we're gonna put sex in our movie
Yes.
because like we don't care about your conservative values. Like
Exactly.
we're going to we're gonna do what we
They
want. in our
pushed the
movie.
envelope in those movies as much as they could because, and especially in horror movies, because they knew one,
It's like
everybody
putting
already
curse
thought
words and music during the '90s.
Yeah,
like
they
it's-
already thought that horror movies were trash anyway. So they were like, well, we might as well up as much horror and blood and guts and boobs and ass as much as possible because they're going to hate us anyway.
Yeah.
And we might as well push the envelope to make a point about them trying to push back on us because of
it was a protest. It was a weird protest, but it was a protest
necessary
in
protest.
entertainment and especially film to present violence and gore and nudity and other things like that to be able to push the envelope and kind of push back the wave of fundamentalism that was kind of
sex
in power in the country at the time.
And sex and nudity are not bad things, and the fact that everybody tries to police that more than the excess violence that goes on in movies and stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I love like excess violence in movies. You know, that it's fine for me. But having that glorified and having the sex and nudity pushed down as that's the thing, the romance and the love and the sex is the bad thing that's in society, that's stupid. And so that's what that pushback sometimes is. And so that's why sometimes in these movies it is gratuitous. There is no point other than flashing some boobs because you can. And so, you know, it doesn't always make story sense. It doesn't always apply. We can call it out, like in the Black Christmas remake. But one way or the other, they put it in because they felt they wanted to. Sometimes it's just for the gratuitousness of showing a girl's boobs, and it's neither here nor there.
For what it's worth, My Bloody Valentine, very empowering nudity. And it is definitely not one of those throwaway nudity scenes like you get in other rated R films where someone just says fuck because they can.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely one of the best uses of nudity in film that I've seen.
And I think, and again, I'm on that same page of that I enjoy the remake more than I enjoy the original. I like the original. I enjoy the remake just a bit more, just story-wise. It just seems more fun. It's more interesting. The kills are great. You know, everything gels together better for me in that way than the original did. But I still like the original because it's got its own charms. So
all right.
Anything else?
I think that's all I got to say.
Nope.
All right. Well, we are going to have another episode hopefully in a couple of weeks. I'm planning on it being right around St. Patrick's Day, and we are going to be doing with me and the kids. There'll be an episode or two before then, but with the kids and I, we are going to be doing Leprechaun and Leprechaun Returns for St. Patrick's Day, and that's a new watch for all of us. None of us have seen either one of those movies, and should be fairly interesting.
Leprechaun come to do no good.
No, he's come to get his pot of gold back. So, all right. So, keep an eye out for that one. I've got at least an episode or two coming up before then. I've got an episode with Gigi Graham coming. She and I talked the stuff and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And then, hopefully, I'll have another episode with Preston Fossil coming up. He's going to be a regular contributor to the show. We're going to try and get out an episode every month with him. And that one should be pretty fun, too. We're going to try to delve into some Grindhouse and some lower tier movies each time we talk. Keep an ear out for those. And hopefully we're going to be going weekly starting next month. Depends on if I can get some extra guests going here. Got quite a few coming up, so that should be pretty good here for at least the next month or so. So putting out on Twitter calls for more guests here to help pad that up. All right, well, until next time, stay creepy.